Heffalump movie. This story is about the time when the friends in the 100-acre wood decide to catch the very frightening Heffalump. It is Roo who eventually realizes that Heffalumps are not very scary and are actually a lot like Roo and his friends. You can follow Roo's adventures in your book. Early one morning, an alarmingly loud and frightening trumpeting noise was heard throughout the usually tranquil 100-acre wood. Pooh was dreaming of honey when he heard this strange sound. He woke up with a fright and fell headfirst into the jar of honey next to his bed. "Oh, bother," he said from inside the honey pot. Piglet was sleeping peacefully when he too was woken by the unfamiliar noise. "Oh, dear," he stammered and ran out of his house in a panic, straight into a sheet hanging on his laundry line.
"It's got me,"
he shouted. Asleep in his hammock, Tigger woke up when he heard the terrible noise. He jumped up and crashed into a picture hanging on the wall. Only Roo was excited when he heard the strange trumpeting noise.
"Mama,"
he called to Kanga.
"did you hear that sound?"
Pooh, Piglet, Tigger, and Roo ran to Rabbit's house.
"He'll know what to do,"
said Piglet. They pounded on Rabbit's door. Rabbit opened the door, still half asleep, wearing a pink bathrobe with curlers in his ears.
"It came at me in the dark,"
moaned Piglet.
"I heard this really neat sound,"
cried Roo.
"It was terrible,"
said Pooh.
"There was a zillion of them,"
insisted Tigger.
"Well, what we have here is a mystery of the most mysterious kind,"
Rabbit declared. The mystery became even more mysterious as just then Roo discovered a huge footprint. The friends were horrified.
"Rabbit,"
asked Pooh in a puzzled kind of way,
"what sort of creature do you suppose would be attached to a foot that big?"
"There's only one thing it could be,"
answered Rabbit.
"A heffalump."
His friends gasped in shock.
"What's a heffalump?"
asked Roo curiously. The others did their best to describe this frightful creature.
"It's got a spiky tail,"
said Tigger.
"And sharp claws,"
added Rabbit. Everyone agreed Heffalumps were big and wide and very, very mean.
"And they live right over there, Heffalump Hollow,"
said Rabbit nervously, pointing out to the other side of the 100-acre wood.
"Let's go get them,"
shouted Roo, very excited at the thought of these strange and fearsome creatures.
"Capture a heffalump?"
asked Rabbit scornfully.
"Impossible." "It'd be an adventure,"
said Roo persuasively.
Thought Rabbit. "The first heffalump expedition in history. Oh, splendid idea."
"But how does one capture a heffalump?"
Pooh inquired.
"Come back with your equipment, and I'll show you how it's done,"
said Rabbit with authority. The others went away and then came back with all sorts of interesting, although not necessarily useful, equipment. Rabbit ignored everything Pooh, Tigger, and Piglet brought, but was impressed with Roo's rope. Rabbit instructed his friends how to throw a rope to catch a heffalump.
"Say in a firm voice," he told them, "in the name of 100-acre wood, I capture you." "I did it!"
shouted Roo as he expertly threw his rope around the practice barrel.
"Let's go get them." Just a moment, Roo. A heffalump expedition is fraught with danger. You're simply too young. You could get hurt," Rabbit said.
"But Roo began. "Roo! Time to come home," called Kanga from a distance. Roo reluctantly went home to Kanga. Before he went to bed, Roo told Kanga about the horrible heffalumps.
"I'm grown up enough to catch a heffalump, aren't I, Mama?"
Roo asked Kanga. "You're growing up very fast indeed, dear," Kanga said.
"Do you think I could grow up by tomorrow morning?"
asked Roo hopefully. "You know, dear, growing up doesn't happen all at once. It takes its own time," Kanga said wisely as she kissed Roo goodnight. In the morning, before anyone else was awake, Roo had already left for his own heffalump expedition, armed with his rope.
"I just know I could catch one," he said to himself. "Ah, yes, a perfect morning for catching heffalumps," said Rabbit as the group set off. "With courage, cunning, and superior tactics, we'll be home by tea time."
But as they approached the fence dividing Heffalump Hollow from the rest of the 100-acre wood, it seemed to the friends that the birds had stopped singing and everything appeared a little darker with strange shadows.
"Oh my,"
muttered Piglet.
"I believe that what's over there doesn't look quite as friendly as what's over here."
But they climbed over the fence to Heffalump Hollow and continued their heffalump hunt. Roo also noticed that the wood seemed a little scarier with darker shadows and strange noises. He saw an old mill with a large wooden door and nervously moved in, holding his rope tightly.
Hello? Is anyone there?
He called out bravely through the dim, dusty darkness. A dark shape rushed past Roo.
You're it,
said a voice, laughing in the shadows. Roo screamed. Something tapped him again.
Now you've got to catch me,
the voice said. Roo leapt up in fright.
I tagged you, so you're it,
explained the dark shape very patiently.
Don't you want to play?
Roo stuttered as he tried to think of an excuse.
I've got to catch a heffalump,
he said. The dark shape giggled and tumbled out of the mill, pushing Roo along with him.
You can catch me. I'm a heffalump.
Out in the bright sunlight, Roo could see that the dark shape was certainly something he'd never seen before.
But you can't be,
Roo said in astonishment, looking at this strange creature.
If you're a heffalump, then where are your horns and spiky tail? Are you sure you're a heffalump? My mummy says I am,
giggled the heffalump.
Well, if you're a heffalump, then in the name of the 100-acre wood, I capture you,
said Roo as he twirled his rope and flung it over the heffalump's neck. The heffalump thought this was a wonderful game and scampered off, pulling Roo, who was holding onto the other end of the rope, behind him.
Stop!
cried Roo desperately as the heffalump dragged him through some bushes.
You've got to come with me,
he insisted.
Why?
asked the heffalump.
Because I'm a grown-up,
Roo said proudly.
Wow, you're a grown-up?
asked the heffalump, impressed.
You must have your own cool then. I haven't found mine yet. My mum said I'll find it when I grow up,
the heffalump explained as he lifted his trunk and tried to blow a loud trumpet. It didn't sound very loud or strong.
Well, growing up takes a long time,
said Roo knowingly.
It took me just about forever.
Just then they heard a loud trumpeting sound, much stronger than the heffalump's attempt.
Got to go now,
said the heffalump cheerfully.
My mummy's calling. Don't go yet. Let's go see my friends first. Then you can go,
begged Roo.
Okay, but as soon as we're done, I've got to go,
said the heffalump. As they hopped and bounced through the forest, the heffalump introduced himself.
My name is Heffridge Trumpler Brompitz Heffalump the Fourth. Whoa, how do you remember all of that?
asked Roo.
I can't, so everybody calls me Lumpy,
replied the heffalump with a giggle. Meanwhile, Pooh, Piglet, Tigger, and Rabbit heard the same loud, frightening trumpeting noise they had heard before. They shrieked and dived into a hollow log.
I suggest a retreat to another part of the wood, said Rabbit.
Roo hopped through the fence leading to his side of the 100-acre wood, but Lumpy stopped. He looked terrified.
I'm not supposed to go in that part of the woods.
Lumpy dropped his voice to a frightened whisper.
Scary things live there.
Huh? said Roo in surprise.
That's where I live. There aren't any scary things in there. There's a stripy thing that bounces, then it pounces,
Lumpy insisted.
No, that's Tigger. He's great,
laughed Roo.
There's this little pink monster that squeals and shakes all the time,
Lumpy continued.
Oh, you're wrong about Piglet, too. He wouldn't hurt a fly,
Roo explained.
And then there's the loud thing, said Lumpy. And it's got long ears and it yells at everybody. Yeah, you're kind of right about Rabbit. But he's okay. Once you get to know him,
Roo admitted.
But my friends aren't scary. Promise?
asked Lumpy.
Promise,
said Roo. So Lumpy wriggled his way through the fence. They made their way to Pooh's house, but there was nobody there. Lumpy sniffed curiously at all the honey pots. Then his long trunk plopped the honey out and right into his mouth.
My mum usually makes me a snack about now,
he explained as he ate all the honey.
Oh, well, I guess Pooh won't mind,
said Roo.
But we'd better leave before we break something.
They tried to tiptoe out carefully, but when they closed the door, several honey pots crashed to the floor. There was no one at Rabbit's house either, but Lumpy found Rabbit's garden and happily munched his way through Rabbit's watermelon. Roo had a mischievous idea. He started spitting watermelon seeds at Lumpy. But Lumpy loaded his trunk with seeds and fired them back at Roo. Roo soon realized that Lumpy was very good at firing with his trunk. Roo and Lumpy had a wonderful time playing games in Rabbit's garden. After a little while, the friends surveyed the damage to Rabbit's garden and each other.
My mom's not going to like this, Rooty Toot, said Lumpy ruefully. Yeah, my mom neither, Lumpster, agreed Roo. Lumpster, said Roo, you're not captured anymore.
And Roo removed the rope around Lumpy's neck. The fearless Heffalump hunters, Tigger, Rabbit, Pooh, and Piglet, ran from Heffalump Hollow and found themselves back in the familiar part of the 100-acre wood.
Well, all in all, a successful Heffalump expedition, noted Rabbit.
Are you sure, Rabbit?
Asked Pooh.
Well, certainly, he replied with conviction. Just look around. You don't see any Heffalumps, do you?
But just as Rabbit looked around, he saw giant Heffalump footprints leading to Pooh's house. The friends stood in Pooh's doorway and looked at the broken honey pots.
Oh, bother, said Pooh in a resigned sort of way. I don't think it's successful anymore.
Rabbit was not so calm when he saw the Heffalump had been in his garden.
The Heffalumps are amongst us,
he cried, frightened.
It's an invasion,
cried Tigger.
Run for your lives,
squealed Piglet.
Hide your honey,
called Pooh.
Trapped! We're trapped,
shouted Piglet. Rabbit stopped.
That's it. We need traps everywhere.
So they built a number of unusual traps.
I'd like to see a Heffalump breach these defenses,
said Rabbit proudly, as the friends stood back to survey the results of their hard work. Roo and Lumpy were still playing in the forest when they heard Mama Heffalump calling to Lumpy from a great distance.
Oh, no! We forgot your mom, said Roo anxiously. I'll help you find her.
But Lumpy and Roo couldn't find Lumpy's mom. Lumpy tried his call, but it was no use. It wasn't loud enough.
I want my mom, he said, sniffing.
Me too, said Roo.
Wait, my mama! She'll know what to do.
So Roo and Lumpy went back to find Kanga. Kanga was also looking for Roo. She hopped through the 100-acre wood calling out to him. But she tripped over a rope, and Tigger's net trap fell over her. "Oh, my goodness!" cried Kanga. "What's all this for?" she asked, as the friends helped her out of the trap.
"We've built traps to catch the Heffalump,"
explained Piglet. Finally, Roo saw Kanga and his friends in the distance. Everything was going to be fine now. He and Lumpy moved forward, both of them holding onto one end of the rope. "Roo!" cried Kanga, very relieved to see him.
"This is Lumpy. He's a Heffalump," introduced Roo.
The friends, except for Kanga, were shocked, then frightened. "Stop him!" called Tigger. Roo was surprised and Lumpy was terrified. The others charged towards him. Lumpy ran away into the trees and disappeared. Roo raced after his friend, following his footprints, until he found Lumpy caught in Pooh's bamboo cage. Lumpy was crying.
"You said they wouldn't be scary," he sniffed. "Oh, Lumpy, I am so sorry," Roo said sadly.
He heard his friends calling out to him and knew he had to get Lumpy out of there quickly. Roo climbed up to the top of the cage and with a big effort managed to undo the knot that held the bamboo stalks together. They fell away instantly. Lumpy reached up with his trunk and gently hugged Roo. But the others found them and saw Lumpy with his trunk coiled around Roo.
"The Heffalumps got him,"
said Pooh, and the Heffalump hunters charged forward, brandishing lassos. "Wait!" shouted Kanga, but it was too late. "In the name of the 100-acre wood, I capture you!" they shouted, and the lassos landed around Lumpy's neck.
"No!" shouted Roo. "Let him go! You're scaring him!" "We were wrong about Heffalumps," insisted Roo. "They're not big and scary. Lumpy's my friend, so you've got to uncapture him." "He gets afraid," Roo explained.
"Oh," said Piglet. He understood what it was like to be afraid. He released his rope from around Lumpy's neck.
"And he likes honey," Roo said.
"Oh," said Pooh. Honey was something he understood. He took his rope off Lumpy.
"He's even learning how to bounce," Roo continued.
"Oh," said Tigger, who knew that bouncing was what Tiggers did best. He undid his rope around Lumpy. Only Rabbit held onto his rope. He looked around at the others and finally gave in, releasing his rope around Lumpy. But Lumpy was still scared, and he slowly backed away. He didn't realize that there was a steep slope behind him. He lost his footing and fell backwards into a huge pile of fallen logs with twisted branches and roots.
Lumpy!
Cried Roo as he grabbed one of the ropes and went after Lumpy. Lumpy managed to grab onto a tree root as Roo was flung off the end of the rope. The friends panicked. Roo had been tossed into the heap of fallen logs where he slipped beneath the twisted branches. Kanga and Tigger tried to pull some of the logs off Roo, but it was no use. The logs were too heavy and the branches and roots were entwined so tightly that it was impossible to separate them.
Roo, I've got an idea,
shouted Lumpy. He ran to the edge of the fallen logs and started to call. His trumpeting was very weak, but he kept trying. Finally, there was a loud and triumphant "Taroot! Taroot!" Lumpy had found his call. He held up his ears, listening intently, and then he heard an answer. It was his mother returning his call.
Mummy!
Lumpy cried in excitement. Mummy? The friends weren't too sure they wanted to see another Heffalump. Mama Heffalump came crashing through the forest, trumpeting. The friends cowered in terror, all except Kanga.
Heffrich Trumpler Brumpet Heffalump the Fourth, where have you been?
She spoke crossly to Lumpy. Then she relented.
Oh, my little darling, I've been worried sick.
She wound her trunk around Lumpy and gave him a tight hug.
I'm okay, Mummy, but my friend Roo's in trouble. Can't you save him?
Lumpy begged. Lumpy led his mother to the hole with the fallen logs. Then she took control.
Roo, can you hear me, love? Now don't be frightened. I'm Lumpy's mummy.
The fallen logs creaked alarmingly as Mama Heffalump used her great strength to throw the logs away, one after the other. She worked tirelessly, moving closer and closer to Roo. She slunk her long trunk through an opening in the logs and reached out to Roo. The others watched anxiously. And then Mama Heffalump emerged from the logs with Roo wrapped around her trunk. She passed Roo back to Kanga.
Mama!
Shouted Roo as he clung to Kanga. Roo, I was so worried, cried Kanga.
Thanks, Mrs. Heffalump,
said Roo. She winked at him and turned towards Lumpy, who trumpeted joyfully.
Oh, Lumpy, you found your call,
Mama Heffalump said proudly. The others watched in amazement.
Well, would you look at that? Heffalumps don't have spiky tails after all,
said Tigger in wonder. Rabbit approached Lumpy cautiously.
Can you ever forgive us? We've acted very badly,
he apologized.
That's okay, long ears, laughed Lumpy. I have to go home now,
Lumpy said to Roo at his mother's nudging.
Goodbye, Lumpster,
said Roo as he hugged his new friend goodbye.
Goodbye, Rooty Toot,
said Lumpy. Then both Roo and Lumpy turned to their mothers and said at the same time,
Could we please stay up just a bit longer?
Their mothers smiled, winked at each other, and agreed. Roo and Lumpy laughed and dashed through the wood, chasing each other. Pooh looked thoughtful.
You know, we never really did capture a Heffalump that day. It was more like Lumpy captured all of us.